let's turn to this big H-1B fight, because it also sort of like dovetails into how Democrats should approach the Trump administration, or anyone who's looking to sort of thwart a lot of the agenda of the Trump administration. It started out, I guess, with Vivek Ramaswamy saying that there was a cultural problem with Americans. That
native in quotes, which means
Native Americans,
white.
Of the traditional hue in this country, that we have become, soft and not merit-based, which sounds a little woke, actually. It makes it seem like people are just getting by on their whiteness, but I don't think that's his point. His point was like, we're not, striving for excellence, and only
because we're like Zach Morris too much.
And only immigrant families.
I want to just give a little context for this, because this is actually very. I think his comments fall into a particular tradition, which is, there's this sort of, traditional racism of the sort of, Charles Murray bell curve type that, people of color have low IQ, are lazy, shiftless, welfare dependent. And Murray got attacked for that. And then he came out with another book basically saying, well, you know what? This is actually also true of poor whites. They're also lazy, shiftless, welfare dependent, not getting married. And he thought, and then this is actually also J.D. Vance's original argument in Hillbilly Elegies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of contingent of the right that basically, I call it sort of like racism against poor people. It is an oddly.
This is also like Moynihan stuff. Even going back to Moynihan, late senator from New York. I mean, this was. But what's
the cultural? It's a sort of so-called cultural explanation. But I mean, the functional purpose of it is it does sort of feed into a kind of socially Darwinist view, which is one sees it in Silicon Valley, and someone like Elon Musk and Trump himself will talk more forthrightly about IQ. We need high IQ people, and I think the trap that we can fall into is because Ramaswamy and Musk are fighting, insane racists like Laura Loomer and Ann Coulter and Steve Bannon. Some people are thinking, these Musk can be our ally. But if you actually look at what Musk and the others believe, I mean, they actually believe in basically racism against poor people. We want a hierarchical elite society, which will also draw in the best from all around the world, and also be organized in a way in which the boss, the Silicon Valley people, the Peter Thiels and the Musks, will have power over these employees. So, I mean, it's a social Darwinist vision that's not too far. It's another. I see it as another variation of racism rather than an alternative to racism.
All right, and let's separate out that trap that you were talking about, because this is really important, I think, too. Is how do you weigh in on this debate without necessarily saying I'm weighing in, on the sort of second order reasons why someone is supportive of this. But the other thing that's
I think one thing is there's two things. One is the sort of traditional, Godzilla versus Mothra stance, which is, let them fight.
Let them fight. Yeah.
Which is I think pretty valid. But I mean, having said that, I mean, I think the important thing to keep in mind is people on the left have long been critical of those visas, and I think for good reason. That this is essentially a guest workers program, which is to get people over who are employees who are doing these jobs who have less rights than American citizens, and the traditional non-xenophobic concern is you actually, if you have immigrants, you want them to have the same rights as other people. And I think that there's a bunch of different ways of getting around this. I think one solution, which I am sort of partial to, is sectoral bargaining. That if one has to go back to Emma's point, if one makes this a labor issue, rather than an ethnicity issue. If one is able to organize these workers to so that they're not indentured, and then to get them not just in Silicon Valley, but sort of poorer undocumented immigrants. If one can get them labor rights, then that actually I think solves a lot of the problems of being able to both get the workers you need, but not having it as them as sort of pawns of to the most Darwinist plutocrats in America.
But that's not what they want, right? And we said this yesterday, talking about immigration as a cudgel against a workforce that has less rights in this country, whether it be this HB1 situation where your visa and where you're living, your employer is if you get fired, you're screwed, you're out. So you're more beholden to your employers. And then same thing, of course, with deportation for undocumented workers. But Bernie was getting criticized for his statement on this front where he talked about American jobs. And that, by the way, and I think he could have focused a little bit more on international worker solidarity, but that's just a quibble. American politicians talk about saving American jobs all the time. But suddenly all these liberals are going after Bernie Sanders because he's putting it within the context of labor exploitation. And I think that's very telling. They don't have a problem when it's used to drum up competition and militarism with China, or if it's to sell a merger or some, business opportunity. But when it's calling out labor exploitation by these companies, they're freaking out. And Warren Gunnels, who works for Sanders, made this point on Twitter, and I just think it's great because Eric Levitz was criticizing Sanders. And he said, I don't think Elon Musk should be allowed to hire H-1B analysts, accountants, or engineers from overseas at Tesla who are paid as little as $52,666 and can have their visa taken away from them by their boss if they complain about unfair or illegal working conditions. The point there is that this framing, it's they're all these tech workers making six figures. Don't call them exploited or indentured servants, which was strong language, but it functions in a similar manner. They're not getting paid great, and they could get fired any day, and they're not getting Social Security or the other stuff that Americans are able to pay into. And that's what guys like Elon and these tech capitalist people who want to make as much money as possible want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then there are there are very documented cases of exploitation within Silicon Valley. People are thinking, well, okay, they're not restaurant workers, so they're doing okay. But there's a couple of issues. One of which is because so many of them are from India, as I myself am. When Silicon Valley, we're seeing a replication of the caste system. Where people who are Brahmins get higher positions, and people who are coming from India who are Dalits, the so-called untouchables, are shunted into lower positions. And when there was attempts to organize and to make caste hiring illegal in America, the Silicon Valley people came out against it, and they used sort of spurious, basically fake anti-racist arguments, saying, "Oh, this is discrimination against Indians if we ban the caste system in America." And beyond that, I think the other great example of this is remember that fake blood thing in Silicon Valley? What's her name? Elizabeth Holmes?
Theranos.
Yeah. So the Wall Street Journal documented this, that a lot of the lower level people in the company had these visas, and they were afraid to speak out against the company and afraid to speak out against the fact that this was a giant fraud because they would have been deported. So the idea that this is Silicon Valley, so there's no class exploitation going on here, that's just ridiculous. That's not how capitalism works.
And there, I've been reading some of this. The Department of Labor supposedly could set wages higher, but again, it's not just about wages; it's about control that comes with the fact that they have a tenuous presence in this country. But the other irony that also struck me about what Vivek said was, he's making this argument that the H-1B folks should be, we should welcome them in And again, like I would welcome them in, but let's really welcome them in by, letting them use, like it's like welcome in, but you can't use the bathroom or the kitchen. You got to stay here for a couple nights, but you don't get the rights of a U.S. worker. But the other irony is that he's making this case that immigrant culture is better and has a better work ethic and turns out better workers. And it's like, well, wait a second. Why wouldn't this apply to all immigrants? Like, we have, you got construction workers coming in here and they have the same work ethic as the ones working in tech, right? Like it's there, it really starts to fall apart on even the slightest bit of scrutiny. And so how do, like, getting back to that idea of intervention, like I am all in favor of them, let them fight thing. But there are instances like where it feels like there's opportunities to sumo wrestle a little bit here by saying like, well, we could take H-1Bs would be okay if they had these protections, that protections, but without it, no. I mean, like the idea of like, I'm going to side with one side or the other. I'm against both of their reasonings, frankly.
No. I think that's right, and I think that is actually Bernie Sanders' position. Like if we're gonna have this visa, it has to be like radically reformed, and the abuses have to end. But I mean, I would actually go a little bit further than that as well. I mean, I think that the sort of the policy angle of let's actually make these visas work. For everyone and not just for the plutocrats. I think that's one good aspect. I think the other thing to maybe point out, which I think also cracks the Trump coalition perhaps even more, is just to point out, like, this is why Musk joined Trump, right? Like Musk and the other Silicon Valley guys, they're really heavily invested on an idea of a kind of deregulated America where they can get all the government funding that they want and bring all the workers that they want, but not be controlled. And especially Musk is very anti-union. So I think like actually making someone like Musk and the sort of exploitation that he does and the sort of larger Silicon Valley culture does is a way of actually not just addressing the policy point, but actually addressing the sort of broader ideological point, the broader sort of political identity point that Emma pointed to. If you're going to be a party of labor, then you have to point out that yes, we reject the racists like Loomer and Bannon who want to keep America white, but we also reject the sort of people like Musk who are using immigration as tool for a larger goal of a much more plutocratic, robber baron America.
Well, what
I think, I wanted to, because this is really important as a model going forward, because there's going to be a lot of this, because there is a lot of incohesiveness. There's a lack of cohesiveness in everything that Trump has espoused, like, tariffs, but low inflation, low taxes, but a low interest rate. I mean, all of it is, there's a deep contradiction in his policy set. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities where we as progressives or leftists or even liberals will find themselves in between this fight, where the answer is they're both wrong, because the reasons why they're pursuing their positions are fundamentally different from where ours are. And you don't just get the outcome, right? Like in these fights. If one of these two sides wins, they win with all the baggage that they're bringing to this fight. It's not just the outcome. H-1B things exist or they don't exist. It is the foundations of these arguments that are important to counteract as we go into the Trump years, because I don't think I've heard, certainly not, and I don't know who would be the leader of this, maybe it's Bannon, maybe it's Loomer. They're not arguing for more worker rights. They are arguing for less invasion of non-Americans, non-traditional Americans or whatever it is. And Musk is now looking for the melting pot that immigration brings and the durability it brings. He's looking for suppressed wages.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I will say Bannon has said some. He himself is incoherent, but he did say something which is very interesting, which is he thought we should really be pushing for Silicon Valley to be 20% Hispanic and 20% Black, and which I would say thank you for making the argument for affirmative action, but also to actually get to that position, you would actually need a huge sort of investment in American education, and which could be done. Which I think America has the people who could be doing these this sort of work, but you would actually have to really heavily invest in it. And Bannon, what makes Bannon sort of just a sort of glib propagandist is he throws these things out without actually thinking through how do you actually get to that end point.
Right, without presenting the consequences and making whoever follows him address those the implications of that. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.